On June 6, 1944, nearly 160,000 Allied troops crossed the English Channel to storm the most heavily fortified coastline in the world. 4 years of German defenses met the full force of Allied industry. What followed changed the course of history. These are the weapons of Operation Overlord. Allied infantry weapons, M1 Garand, the standard rifle of the American infantryman. A semi-automatic 30 caliber rifle holding 8 rounds in an en-bloc clip. The Garand gave American soldiers a decisive advantage. They could fire 8 shots before reloading, while German infantry worked bolt actions. General Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. Every American rifleman who waded ashore on Omaha and Utah carried one. 8 rounds against a machine gun nest doesn't sound like much, but it was better than 5. M1 Carbine, a lighter, shorter .30 caliber semi-automatic carbine, issued to officers, paratroopers, and support troops who needed something more compact than the Garand. It fired a less powerful cartridge, but was easier to handle in tight spaces, critical for paratroopers jumping into Normandy before dawn. Over 6 million were produced. Convenient, reliable, and everywhere on D-Day. Lee Enfield No. 4, Britain's standard infantry rifle, a bolt-action .303 caliber weapon with a 10-round magazine. Despite being bolt-action, trained British soldiers could fire 15 aimed rounds per minute, the famous Mad Minute. The No. 4 was accurate, rugged, and battle-proven across 2 world wars. Canadian and British troops on Gold, Juno, and Sword Beaches carried these into the surf. M1A1 Thompson submachine gun, the iconic American submachine gun, .45 caliber, 600 rounds per minute. Devastating at close range. Paratroopers and assault troops loved it for house clearing and trench fighting. Heavy, with significant recoil, but at close quarters inside a bunker or hedgerow, the Thompson was brutally effective. It became the weapon of choice for anyone expecting to fight in tight spaces. Sten gun, Britain's cheap, mass-produced 9mm submachine gun. It looked improvised because it essentially was. Designed to be manufactured quickly from stamped metal parts. Prone to jamming, ugly, and unglamorous, but it put automatic fire in the hands of British and Commonwealth troops when they needed it most. Resistance fighters received thousands by parachute drop. Simple enough that anyone could use one. Browning Automatic Rifle, America's squad automatic weapon, a 30 caliber magazine-fed automatic rifle carried by 1 man in each rifle squad. It provided the assault team with suppressive fire. Not a true machine gun, but heavier firepower than a rifle. BAR men were valuable and targeted. German machine gunners knew to shoot the man with the big gun first. M1919 Browning machine gun, the American medium machine gun, air-cooled, belt-fed, 30 caliber, capable of 400 to 600 rounds per minute, mounted on vehicles, in fixed positions, and on tripods for infantry support. Reliable and proven, the M1919 was everywhere, on jeeps, on landing craft, on Sherman tanks as coaxial weapons. It did the grinding work of suppression that kept attacking infantry alive. M2 Browning 50 caliber, half-inch rounds at 450 rounds per minute. The M2 wasn't just a machine gun, it was an anti-vehicle, anti-aircraft, anti-everything weapon. Half-tracks, landing craft, and ships, the M2 dominated anything it touched. German aircraft that strayed low enough to engage ground troops faced 50 caliber fire from dozens of directions. Still in service today, still devastating. M1 Bazooka, America's shoulder-fired anti-tank rocket launcher. A 2.36-inch rocket that could penetrate the armor of most German tanks, if you hit the right spot. 2 men operated it. 1 aimed and fired, 1 loaded. Against Panthers and Tigers, the bazooka needed side or rear shots. Against lighter vehicles and fortifications, it was excellent. Thousands went ashore on D-Day to give infantry a fighting chance against German armor. PAIT. Britain's projector infantry anti-tank. An ugly spring-powered weapon that threw a shaped charge grenade. Awkward to cock, painful to fire, with a short effective range of under 100 yards. But it worked when it had to. On D-Day and throughout Normandy, British and Canadian infantry used PAITs to knock out tanks and bunkers at uncomfortably close range. Not loved, but used. M9A1 Bazooka, an improved bazooka with a larger 3.5-inch rocket introduced later in the war. The original 2.36-inch round struggled against heavier German armor. The 3.5-inch version fixed that. Showed the constant arms race between Allied infantry weapons and German armor. Number 36, Nils Bomb. The British fragmentation grenade, in service since World War I. A pineapple-shaped cast-iron grenade with a 4-second fuse. Reliable, effective, and carried by every Commonwealth infantryman. Thousands were thrown at German bunkers along the beaches and in the bocage fighting that followed. Mark II fragmentation grenade, the American pineapple grenade, serrated cast iron body, TNT filler, 4 to 5 second fuse, standard issue for every American soldier. Bunkers, trenches, rooms, wherever infantry had to fight in close, grenades did the killing. On Omaha Beach, grenades went into pillbox embrasures when rifles couldn't reach. Allied armor, M4 Sherman, the workhorse of the Allied armored force, a medium tank with a 75mm gun, reliable Ford or Continental engine, and simple enough mechanics to be repaired in the field. America produced over 49,000 Shermans. Reliability and numbers were its strengths. Against the German Panther and Tiger, the standard Sherman struggled. Its 75mm gun couldn't penetrate their frontal armor at range, but it could flank, it could be repaired, and when 10 Shermans met 1 Tiger, math won eventually. Sherman Firefly, a British modification of the Sherman mounting the powerful 17-pounder anti-tank gun. This version could kill Panthers and Tigers from the front. Each British armored troop received 1 Firefly among 3 Shermans. German tank commanders learned quickly to identify and target the Firefly first. The extra-long gun barrel was visible from a distance. The Firefly solved the Sherman's firepower problem, but never existed in large enough numbers. Churchill infantry tank, the heavily armored British infantry tank. Slow but nearly impervious to many German anti-tank weapons at the ranges of Normandy's close terrain. The Churchill carried a 75mm gun and thick armor designed to support infantry through defended positions. Specialized Churchill variants, the Funnies, became some of the most important vehicles on D-Day. DD Sherman, a Sherman tank fitted with a canvas flotation screen and twin propellers, allowing it to swim ashore from landing craft. An audacious engineering solution to the problem of getting armor onto a defended beach. On Utah Beach, DD Shermans arrived with the infantry and provided critical fire support. On Omaha, most of the 29 DD tanks launched sank in rough seas, leaving infantry without armor. The difference in outcomes between the 2 beaches was partially written by the fate of these swimming tanks. Crab Flail Tank, a Sherman modified with a rotating drum of chains at the front that beat the ground to detonate mines. Called the Crab or Flail, it cleared paths through minefields for following infantry and vehicles. Mine clearing under fire with a machine that looked ridiculous but saved hundreds of lives. British and Canadian troops had them. American troops at Omaha didn't. M10 tank destroyer, an open-topped turret on a Sherman hull mounting a 3-inch anti-tank gun. Fast and well-armed, the M10 was designed to hunt tanks with speed and firepower rather than armor. Tank destroyers operated on the flanks, looking for angles. Against Panthers from the side or rear, the 3-inch gun was effective. Against the frontal armor of Tigers, it struggled. M5 Stuart light tank, a fast, light tank used primarily for reconnaissance, armed with a 37mm gun, inadequate against anything but the lightest German armor. Stuarts didn't slug it out with Panzers. They found them, reported back, and stayed alive to scout again. Speed was the Stuarts' armor. Allied artillery, M101 105mm howitzer. The standard American divisional artillery piece, towed by trucks or half-trucks. The 105mm fired high-explosive, smoke, and illumination rounds out to 11,000 yards. Artillery won battles in World War II more than any other weapon. In Normandy, the 105mm provided the rolling barrages and fire support that made infantry advances possible against determined German defenders. Britain's legendary field gun and howitzer combined, firing a 25-pound shell out to 13,400 yards. The 25-pounder was accurate, reliable, and fast. Trained crews fired 8 rounds per minute. It was the backbone of British and Commonwealth artillery from North Africa to Northwest Europe. Hundreds landed in Normandy to support the ground advance. M7 Priest, a 105mm howitzer mounted on an M3 tank chassis. Self-propelled artillery that could keep pace with armored units. American armored divisions brought M7 Priests ashore to provide mobile fire support. When tanks and infantry advanced, the Priests followed, delivering artillery without needing to reposition towed guns. M12 gun motor carriage, a 155mm gun on a tank chassis, capable of destroying fortifications at long range. A small number supported the Normandy campaign with heavy fire support against strongpoints. When a concrete bunker resisted smaller calibers, the 155mm answered. Allied air power P-51 Mustang, the finest American fighter of the war. A Merlin-engined long-range escort fighter that could accompany bombers to Berlin and back. Over Normandy, Mustangs provided top cover, attacked German ground forces, and swept German fighters from the sky. With 6.50 caliber machine guns and exceptional range, the P-51 gave Allied forces air superiority that proved decisive throughout the campaign. P-47 Thunderbolt, a massive, radial-engined American fighter bomber, heavily armored, fast in a dive, and capable of carrying bombs and rockets for ground attack. Thunderbolts became the premier Allied ground attack aircraft over Normandy, hunting German tanks, supply columns, and troop concentrations. German soldiers called Allied fighter bombers Jabos and feared them intensely. The Thunderbolt was the Jabo they feared most. Hawker Typhoon, Britain's dedicated ground attack aircraft. Armed with 4 20mm cannons and rockets or bombs, the Typhoon was devastating against German armor. After the Normandy breakout, Typhoons attacked German columns retreating through the Falaise pocket with catastrophic effect. In the close air support role, the Typhoon was among the most effective aircraft of the entire war. B-17 Flying Fortress, America's heavy bomber. 4 engines, 10.50 caliber machine guns, and up to 8,000 pounds of bombs. On D-Day morning, over 1,000 B-17s and B-24s bombed the beaches ahead of the landings. At Omaha, cloud cover caused bombardiers to delay release, and most bombs fell miles inland, missing the German defenses entirely. The bombing that was supposed to soften the Atlantic Wall largely failed on the most critical beach, C-47 Skytrain, the twin-engine transport that delivered the American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions and the British 6th Airborne into Normandy before dawn on June 6th. Over 900 C-47s dropped paratroopers and towed gliders into the darkness. Scattered by clouds and German flak, the drops were chaotic, but the presence of airborne troops behind German lines created confusion that proved strategically valuable. Allied naval weapons. 16-inch naval gun, USS Nevada, Texas, Arkansas. Allied battleships standing offshore brought naval gunfire of overwhelming power to bear on German coastal defenses. The USS Texas fired 14-inch shells that could destroy fortifications no land-based artillery could reach. Naval gunfire was one of the few weapons that demonstrably suppressed German beach defenses on D-Day. Where it was used accurately, infantry casualties fell. LCT, Landing Craft Tank, the flat-bottomed vessel that carried tanks and vehicles to the beach. Open to the weather, slow, and uncomfortable, LCTs were the unglamorous delivery mechanism for Allied armor. Their ramp dropped, and out came the tanks. When rough seas swamped them or German fire hit them, the tanks went to the bottom. Everything depended on these ungainly vessels working. LCVP, Higgins Boat, the landing craft that delivered infantry to the beaches, 36 men, plus crew, a ramp at the bow, and no armor to speak of. When the ramp dropped, men waded into fire. General Eisenhower credited Andrew Higgins, who designed this boat, as the man who won the war. Hundreds carried the assault waves onto all 5 beaches. For the men inside them, those final minutes before the ramp dropped were among the most terrifying moments of the 20th century. German weapons, MG42. The weapon Allied soldiers feared above all others. A belt-fed German machine gun firing 1,200 rounds per minute. So fast it sounded like tearing fabric, rather than individual shots. One MG42 team could pin down an entire company. The Atlantic Wall was built around MG42 positions with interlocking fields of fire. On Omaha Beach, a handful of MG42s caused the majority of American casualties. No weapon defined the horror of the D-Day beaches more than this one. Karabiner 98K, Germany's standard bolt-action rifle. A 7.92mm weapon with 5-round magazine, accurate and reliable, that outpaced by the semi-automatic Garand in volume of fire. The K98 was a fine rifle. Against American infantry with Garands, German riflemen fired 1 shot to every 2 or 3 Allied rounds. In individual duels, skill mattered. In sustained firefights, volume told. MP40, Germany's submachine gun, a 9mm weapon firing 500 rounds per minute, compact and controllable. Issued to NCOs, vehicle crews, and paratroopers, the MP40 was effective in close-range fighting. Its distinctive folding stock made it recognizable in every photograph of German soldiers in Normandy. STG-44, Sturmgewehr, the world's first true assault rifle, firing a 7.92mm intermediate cartridge. The STG-44 combined the range of a rifle with the fire rate of a submachine gun. Revolutionary and potentially war-changing if produced earlier and in greater numbers. By Normandy, it was appearing in the hands of some German units. Had it been standard issue in 1942, the war might have looked different. Panzerfaust, a single-shot disposable anti-tank weapon firing a large-shaped charge grenade. Cheap, simple, and deadly. Any German soldier could knock out a Sherman at under 100 yards. The Panzerfaust was the great equalizer. Allied tankers learned to fear infantry-held positions for this reason. One man, one shot, one dead tank. Produced in the millions. Panther tank. Germany's response to the Soviet T-34, and arguably the finest tank of the war. A 75mm high-velocity gun that could penetrate any Allied tank at long range, combined with well-sloped frontal armor, impervious to most Allied anti-tank weapons. The Panther was faster than the Tiger and better balanced. When Allied tankers met Panthers in the Normandy bocage, they needed numbers, flanking shots, or Firefly Shermans. Panthers were in Normandy in significant numbers and caused enormous damage. Tiger I, the tank that haunted Allied nightmares, an 88mm gun that could destroy any Allied tank before the Allied tank could respond. Armor so thick that frontal penetration was nearly impossible for most Allied weapons. Slow, mechanically unreliable, and expensive. Germany couldn't produce enough of them. But where Tigers appeared, Allied commanders responded with overwhelming force, artillery, and air power rather than tank-to-tank combat. Psychologically, the Tiger's reputation exceeded even its formidable reality. 88mm flat gun, originally an anti-aircraft weapon, turned into the war's most feared anti-tank gun. The 88mm could destroy any Allied tank at ranges beyond 2,000 meters, farther than Allied tankers could effectively return fire. Deployed in anti-tank roles throughout Normandy, the 88 stopped Allied armored advances repeatedly. When infantry crested a ridge and found an 88 covering the approach, the only answer was artillery, or a very long detour. Nebelwerfer, Germany's multi-barrel rocket artillery, fired in salvos with a distinctive screaming sound. Allied soldiers called it Screaming Mimi. The psychological effect alone was significant. Multiple rockets landing simultaneously made it difficult to take cover effectively, used throughout Normandy to break up Allied infantry concentrations and attack supply areas. Atlantic Wall fortifications, not a single weapon but a system. Concrete casemates, reinforced bunkers, towboat pits, and wider stands nester, resistance nests, linked by trenches and wire. Steel obstacles on the beaches. Belgian gates, hedgehogs, stakes with mines attached. The Atlantic Wall was only partially complete on D-Day, and was thinner than German propaganda claimed, but, where it was complete, at Omaha, it nearly stopped an Allied landing, with a fraction of the defenders the Allies had expected. Conclusion. Operation Overlord succeeded not because any single weapon was decisive, but because the Allies brought everything. Overwhelming naval gunfire, paratroopers in the night, swimming tanks, mine-clearing machines, 5,000 ships and 13,000 aircraft. And threw it all at the Atlantic Wall simultaneously. The Germans had better individual weapons in many categories. The MG42 was deadlier than any Allied machine gun. The Panther was a better tank than the Sherman. The 88mm had no Allied equivalent. But the Allies had numbers, logistics, and industrial production on a scale Germany could not answer. They had complete air superiority. They had Eisenhower's deception operation convincing Hitler that Normandy was a feint. And they had 160,000 soldiers willing to wade through fire. The weapons were the instruments. The will to use them, that was the deciding factor.